well to continue on his healing journey. He made a good breakthrough yesterday, but he's still got a lot of ways to go before he'll be back in Tucson. So if everyone can take lead from Debbie, and then Debbie will introduce our great speaker, Kaitlin Curtice. So thank you all for being here.
Invite you all to stand. My little brother Miguel always begins all of our prayers and our blessings with the blessing in the four directions. And recalling for us who our ancestors are. So from my own ancestry, my mother and my grandmother's side, Pascua Yaqui here from Full Pascua community, and my dad, Eastern Cherokee. And I consider Miguel a little brother of mine. We do a lot in the community together. It seems like at times, we share that sort of same gift that has been gifted to us through our different relatives to do these blessings and to be in the community as spiritual leaders. So I want to keep that in mind as we're doing this. I'm not Miguel, but I feel like his energy is here with us. Some of the medicines I'm using are medicines that Miguel and I collected together. And so I will ask you, let's face the east. Itomachi, Achia, Adonai. Creator God, we look to the east at the feelings of new beginnings and new life and new earth. This especially particular time, especially for Miguel, that he just completed his duties in the ceremonials at our village in Old Pascua, and the blessings that come with that, in that direction of the east direction. Let us hold him in prayer as we also hold in prayer this change in his health, that he has taken a new step and a new beginning towards healing, that we pray with him and ask for healing for him. When we turn to the south, so much in. And here we ask for the strength of our ancestors, our people, both Miguel's people, the Ataman, the Pascua Yaqui people, and my people all come from the south direction, have migrated to this direction, and their spirits remain with us. We have the strength of our grandmas, and we ask you to have that strength and embrace Miguel as he continues to heal, to surround him and protect him, to guard him, and to bring to him that realization, the dancing in the spirit world that has brought him into this wonderful place of ceremony. We turn to the west. In this direction, Creator God, we are so aware of what comes at the end of the day that begins a new time, and the sacredness that comes into the darkness, that oftentimes it is the time when we really connect with the spirit, because the things that would distract us are not visible. And that we find ourselves, Creator God, in that dream world, also in the west direction. And we recall that that dream world is where Miguel has been living now for the last 4 days. And we ask you, Creator God, in thanksgiving, that he's come out of that dream world and into this world again in a good way, that he comes out strong once again. We remember Katrina and Mateo, his wife, and his little son, and all who love him and care for him, because those prayers came from the west direction in his darkness and brought him back to us into this good way. And then Creator God, we turn to the north, and the north direction where the cool beginnings the coolness of the earth, the tilt of the earth away from the sun that brings that coolness, that we're now tilting back away again, and it's going into its own place again in darkness, the people to the north of us. And then thanksgiving for Kaitlin and her people, the Potawatomi people that come from that north direction. We offer these prayers, Creator God, for her safe journey here, for her family that lent her time to us, to give us this time with her, to listen to her strength and her wisdom. And we hold also, Creator God, that wonderful sweetgrass braid that we put on the altar to honor her and all those ancestors who brought her the wisdom to write down the things that she writes. And then, Creator God, we thank you for our Mother Earth, this beautiful building, and this beautiful campus, and all of the blessings that we've noticed in this last couple of days being here. And then, Creator God, we also send our prayers upward. Let our smoke, let our prayers, let our intentions, let our spirits soar. Chokyu Tizim. Thank you for coming, everybody. What a blessing to have you here. And selfishly, I have to tell you, it's a blessing for me to have Kaitlin here. Kaitlin and I met because she is such a great woman. She answered a Facebook Messenger message from a crazy woman, a crazy Yaqui lady who wrote her a note and said, "Oh my God, I just finished your book on the native book, and I have no words." It changed me because I heard my voice, I heard my spirit, I heard the struggles that I had encountered in my own time in Kaitlin's words. And I felt so celebrated that I was able to recognize myself in her words. And so I sent her a Facebook Messenger, and she responded. I'm like, oh my goodness. So then we kind of started up a little conversation back and forth, and I've had an opportunity to be with her when she's presented in other places. We've ended up in similar locations at times. When I was visiting my family, her family was over there visiting in that space. We got to celebrate a lot of these coincidences that it's clear to me that she has been brought into the space that I occupy for a very good reason. And I can't tell you what that is, but I can only tell you that I know that from my ancestors and what my grandmas have taught me is that it's not for me, it's all for you. And that was my intention in partnering with Felina, with Miguel, with Billy, with Danny, with all of the folks that we're working with through the Four Winds community to bring this spirit here to share and to let you be who you are, and to tell you all what a great example of a strong Indigenous young woman she is, and how much of a blessing it is to know that we have that in our future, that I can look at her and say things will always be good, all will be well. So help me welcome Kaitlin and her second book she's going to be talking to us about. And as you heard, there are 2 other books before this. So don't forget that.
Can you hear me? You don't hear me? Can you hear me? Do I need to put it closer to myself?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, can you hear me now? No, I'm just asking. Hold on, let me see if I can. Can you hear me if I talk like this?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great. That's the hardest part of all of it. All right, Bonjour, Kaitlin Curtice and Desha Pass, Potawatomi and Dow. My name is Kaitlin. I am a citizen of the Potawatomi Nation. And I'm so grateful to be here with all of you. I'm so grateful to Debbie for setting this up and her friendship and what it means for me to come back to the West. I grew up in New Mexico, between New Mexico and Oklahoma for a lot of my younger childhood. And so I really love getting to come back this way. It's always really a blessing to me. So I'm going to be sharing a little bit. This is a talk called Becoming Caring Resistors. And it's based on my book, Living Resistance, which we have back there for sale. And I'll be doing a signing after this. If anyone brought a book, I'll sign anything. So and the design in the center here is a framework, a cyclical framework that I created for the book called the 4 Realms of Resistance. And there are some cards in the back as well that are free. So if there are any, as long as there's some left, please take one. It's got the design. The cover was illustrated by an Anishinaabe artist. Morningstar Designs is her company, Alana Jewel, and she's incredible. And so this is the cover of the book, and on the other side, it kind of describes the 4 realms. So I'm going to be reading from the book, sharing a few things. And this talk is really focused on 3 things. It's on care for ourselves, care for each other, and care for Mother Earth. That's kind of at the center of my book. It's really at the center of a lot of my work and what I do in the world. So yeah, I'm so excited to be with you. I wrote a book on resistance, which is a hard and strange and popular topic right now. And I wanted to write a book on how we can sort of stretch these ideas of resistance. What does it mean for our daily lives? And I know a lot of us come from all different backgrounds and life stories and paths. And that's, I think, what is really beautiful about this work is that we get to come together and share our stories with one another and share this work together. So I like to begin my talks and end my talks with a poem. And I also like to take deep breaths because I need them often. So we're going to take a deep breath together, and then I want to read you a poem from my book. So let's take a deep breath in. Deep breath out. Just one more. Deep breath in. Breathe out. What is a poem? It is the quietest, softest part of you, held to an invisible microphone, held up to the light, held up beyond the hustle and bustle of the day and the groaning aches of the night. A poem is the anger that releases itself in your time of greatest need, when you are ready to fracture before you believe again, ready to break open and receive yourself to yourself. A poem is the whisper that tells everything, the secret that cannot be denied. You are exactly as you've always been. Beloved word, spoken self, relieved ache, tender child. The poem was you. It always was. So why resistance? Resistance, the way that I'm sharing it in my book and in my work, is that resistance is the way that we use our everyday lives to exert energy against the status quo of our time. And so maybe that status quo is colonization or white supremacy or hate. What is the status quo that we live in? What are the ways that we are hurt by society, by the things that happen in the world? And so when we're resisting something, we're not just pushing against something, but we're also choosing something on the other side. So what kind of world do we want to build on the other side of what we're pushing against? Why do we resist? Why do we push against the status quo? That's something that I'm interested in. And so this talk on becoming caring resistors is looking at that through these lenses of caring for ourselves, caring for each other, and caring for the earth. So I'm going to be sharing some stories from the book, and we're just going to journey through what it means to be a caring resistor, because when we care for ourselves, when we care for each other, when we care for the earth, it's all connected. It is how we can be better in this world. It is how we can walk a good path. Curiosity takes root in us as children. I truly believe that. But as we get older, we are often taught to trade curiosity for security. And often that security is baked into the status quo of society, of capitalism, which in reality is anything but secure for many of us. Instead of engaging with Mother Earth or the creatures around us, we are taught to commodify the land. We are taught to trust our religious leaders or parents or teachers more than our own sacred instincts. As a result, we stop listening to our hearts or to our own knowing. There's an author named Sadhguru, and he has a book called Karma, and he says, "We have frittered away our freedom, bartered and sold it to external authorities, whether parental, religious, cultural, or political. Instead of exercising the freedom of consciousness, of choice, we have bought into the voices that have told us that to be human is to be limited, even sinful." So in 6th grade, I learned how to balance a checkbook, but I didn't learn how to communicate with my creature relatives or the earth in a sustainable way. I didn't learn lessons on what it means to be an Indigenous woman or an Indigenous young girl. So as adults, many of us are now on this path of healing, of realizing that we must reclaim this curiosity toward ourselves and toward the land around us. And so as we do that, we begin shifting, and this idea of resistance is what comes from that. This is where we begin a journey of deconstruction. My second book is called Native: Identity, Belonging, and Rediscovering God. And it's, if you haven't read it, it's my journey of coming to terms with the Southern Baptist tradition that I was raised in. I was raised a very evangelical Christian girl. My stepdad was a pastor, so I was very much assimilated into this upbringing that was beautiful, but also really harmful for me in a lot of ways. And so that book is about me coming to terms with my identity and knowing what it means to be a proud Potawatomi woman, and also trying to reconcile that with a colonial Christianity that I was raised in. And so this idea of deconstruction is basically asking questions of the things that I was raised in, and listening to my own story and sharing stories with others so that we can grow together. And so I've experienced many different seasons in my life, many different layers of these questions. In college, I took a world literature class, and then later I studied social work. And I remember both of these spaces were one of the first places in my life where I was able to ask questions. I don't think that I was given safe places to just ask really hard questions and be challenged, to challenge what I did. Being in social work was an incredible experience because I met so many different people, and we studied the things that hurt us, that hurt people, how society has been created and what it does. And it was really powerful. So those are a few things that have shaped me and continue to shape my writing. So I want to ask, who are you? I want to turn this to becoming hearing resistors for our own soul. I want to read to you from my book. Since my earliest years, I have been a very ritualistic person. Whether I understood it as ritual or not, I enjoyed having space to honor things in myself and around me. The more I became embedded in the Southern Baptist tradition of the faith I was raised in, the more I wandered from that ritualistic way of being. Ritual is allowed in the church, but only in ways that fit, that are part of the atonement process to cleanse our souls from sin and embrace a certain kind of community. As much as I wanted to be close to God, I also lacked a closeness, because I only knew a colonized version of God that did not value all of my questions or the nonlinear way I wanted to understand the world around me. In the last few years, I have come back to ritual again, but in my own way. I honor the seasons and cycles the way my Potawatomi ancestors did. I allow myself to process on a cyclical timeline instead of a linear one. I take breaks to honor rest and work to decolonize the aspects of my spirituality that clamp down on my questions. There's an organization called the NAP Ministry, and the founder is named Trisha Hersey, and she has a new book out called Rest is Resistance, and I highly recommend it. She wrote this in a piece about the book. She says, "My rest as a Black woman in America, suffering from generational exhaustion and racial trauma, always was a political refusal and social justice uprising in my body. I took to rest and naps and slowing down as a way to save my life, to resist the systems telling me to do more, and most importantly, as a remembrance to my ancestors who had their dream space stolen from them. This is about more than naps." Trisha knows that naps are resistance and ritual, that they save us and hold us and give something back to us. So one afternoon in early winter, I felt this ache that I couldn't put words to. I knew I was grieving. I was grieving things I lost in the last year. I was grieving all that the pandemic took from us. I was grieving the loss of our dog, Sam, who we had since before we were married. I was grieving the change of relationships, and I needed space to honor the change. So I went into my office, I closed the door, and I lit a few candles. I placed them on the floor and sat down, bringing strips of paper and a pen along with me, and I took my time, letting the tears come, letting myself feel whatever I needed to feel. I was angry. I was so sad it felt like I couldn't breathe. I was also somehow grateful. I wrote down the things I lost on the first strips of paper, honoring each one slowly and naming them to myself. Then I moved to the next pile of papers where I wrote something I gained. We lost our dog, Sam, but we gained a puppy named Liz. I lost relationships, but I gained other ones, as well as a better sense of myself. I said goodbye to the season before and welcomed in the season here and the season to come. I cried more. I took deep breaths until my body's systems found their grounding. I honored everything that is sacred about hurting and healing and not knowing what comes next. So I want you to think about some of the rituals that you have honored in your own life. What are some of the personal rituals that you have created for yourself? Or maybe you have rituals with community, with friends that sort of tether you back to your body or back to your soul. But before we even think about rituals, I think it's important for us to ask if we love ourselves and what it means to love ourselves. Some of us are never allowed to hit rock bottom. We're the ones who have to keep the family together, to keep the parents happy, to keep the teachers happy, to keep the pastor nodding in approval. We're not allowed to say, I've become someone I don't know and the hole is deep. Sometimes it feels like there are no deep holes for us. But in these spaces, we're exploring this idea of self-love, which I write about in my book. Radical self-love is not the same as self-care. We talk about self-care a lot, but self-care is this idea that's gotten swallowed up by capitalism as well. We have to buy our self-care, right? But that's a different conversation. Self-love is how we shift our focus on how we think of ourselves and what space we hold for ourselves. There's an author named Nadwa Zebian, and she has a book called Welcome Home, A Guide to Building a Home for Your Soul. It's a beautiful book. And she says that self-love is a room we must enter in ourselves daily, a place that we frequent. She says self-love is an integral part of your everyday life, not a luxury that you treat yourself to. Put real work into giving yourself what you need. When I was in my early 30s, I never imagined many things. I didn't understand my body's response to trauma. I didn't understand the ways that I was people-pleasing. I lacked healthy boundaries in my personal and work life. I was daily entering a room of self-hate and shame instead of self-love. But she reminds us that whatever room we enter becomes our daily experience. So when I finally was able to get quiet, I began to notice what was going on inside myself. I noticed that if my work and my identity markers were stripped away, I was afraid of what I would find. I was afraid to face myself, my own soul. But when we make space for that, what do we find? What kind of room are we living in? What kind of room are you living in inside of yourself? So take a moment and think about this. Can you begin to pack up and clear out one room and imagine yourself in a different room? What would your room of self-love look like? I encourage you later to maybe sit with that, close your eyes and actually picture a physical space or journal about it. Write down the things that you would love to have in a room, a place where you feel safe to completely be yourself, where you feel completely loved. That's part of how we love ourselves. That's part of becoming caring resistors for ourselves. But then it doesn't stop there, because once we care for ourselves, we have to care for each other in community. We move from loving ourselves to loving one another. So I want to read another poem. This is from part 2 of the book. And this second realm, I'm reading from the second realm here, this brown one, and it's called the communal realm. So in this space, we're thinking about what community is, what care and community looks like. Maybe you don't know strength until you've rested beneath the branches of a magnolia tree. feeling the weight of her regal waxed leaves. Maybe you don't know community until you've watched ants rebuild what was broken by a world much bigger than theirs. Maybe you don't know fortitude until you've noticed geese fly to the furthest border of warmth to protect their children. Maybe you don't know compassion until you place your hands in the dirt and feel the pulse of the earth, her heart and soul welcoming you. Maybe you don't know time until you run your fingers over a river rock, their skin softened by generations of magic. Maybe you don't know yourself until the mirror of the water reminds you of your goodness and brings you home again. So because I'm an author, I often get asked when I fill out like the document for a new book, they ask me what my intended audience is. And so who's gonna read the book? And in a recent questionnaire, I wrote down human being because I didn't want to try to choose anyone specific. I didn't want to put, women between the age of 40 and 55 or women in these certain places. I just want people. I just want people to read my books because people write books and people read books. And of course, I understand why they have to ask that question, but I want to be able to exchange, have this reciprocity of care in my writing, in my words. This reciprocity goes beyond a target audience or a marketing technique, but it's difficult to claim that we belong to each other sometimes because we have so badly harmed one another throughout the centuries. How do we practice belonging? How do we share our work and our medicine with each other and trust that solidarity will happen? And what is solidarity? Solidarity, of course, originally came from Latin and it meant sturdy or firm or undivided. And then it found its way to the English language. And we say that it means unity that produces or is based on a community of interest. So what is our interest? Resistance is tied to solidarity. So to resist that status quo, to resist hate in the world, to resist injustice, we have to be clear about what is our solidarity rooted in. Why do we care about each other? Why do we want to protect each other? What are we holding ourselves to in community? So solidarity movements matter. We have seen throughout history that solidarity comes at a cost. Yet we gain so much when we gather together and commit to each other's well-being. When we refuse to look away from one another and practice solidarity, we are seeing each other. I practice solidarity when I remember that we belong to each other. And then we also have this idea of kinship, which of course is an important idea for many of us. Kinship is something I didn't grow up learning about, especially in the Southern Baptist Church. That was not a term that we used often. Kinship for a lot of people can feel really abstract. And the way that I describe it for people is that I have a thread, a tether attached to my heart, and it stretches to each of you. And it stretches to all the creatures of the earth. It stretches to the trees, it stretches to the waters, it stretches to the heart of Mother Earth. So this tether is what ties us to each other. So whatever I do with my body, whatever I think, whatever I practice, it affects you. And whatever you do with your body, with your story, with your experiences, it travels across that thread and affects me. And that's a way that I can think of kinship, is that it's this constant connection that we can't get away from each other, that we belong to one another. And kinship is rooted in this idea of storytelling. It's grounded in the work of listening, right? Of taking in each other's stories, which is something we've not done well a lot in our society. The fear of listening to each other's stories means that we can't make someone else a this or that human. We like to other people. And when we listen to each other's stories, we don't get to do that anymore because we truly see one another. We hold space with each other. So where can you lean into another person's story in your everyday life? Where are you finding solidarity and community lately? I want to read something from my second book, Native. This is a section when I'm talking about how we are connected to each other. Our spiritual realities do not exist in a vacuum. To be connected to our own spirituality, we must be connected to the spirituality of others. This means our spirituality is directly tied to institutions that police the spiritual lives of others. We have always been here, but what does it do to our spiritual essence to know that we will be punished for expressing our ways of knowing Creator? And how does that affect our connectedness as a whole? Colonization and white supremacy steal so much from Indigenous peoples, from Black peoples who were stolen from their homelands and enslaved in the US. And we cannot deny that this history is a spiritual one. So my spiritual liberation is tied to the spiritual liberation of all of my relatives who face oppression, whose bodies are policed, who are told that they are less than. Are we not working to be liberated together? And are our spirits not bound together to fight institutional injustices that have existed in America since its beginning? Everyone who joins in this space is joining the work of fighting systems of dehumanization. We are bearing good fruit in hopes of creating newness in the world. Creating this new world and bearing this fruit goes beyond the work that we do, but sometimes it's living into what we read in the books that we buy. It's living into community. It's living into care with one another. So what happens as we learn to care for each other? We can start imagining and practicing what it means to care for Mother Earth, or Sigmukwe, as we call her, Potawatomi. Many of us know that the foundation of America is a violent one. In Potawatomi, our word for America is Chibukmakik, which means land of the long knives. And that's our word for the institution that was created, not the land itself, but what was created through that violence. And so we remember that in our own languages. The foundation of America began with disembodiment, with a severing the relationship between the land and the peoples indigenous to the place. There's a book called Abuelita Faith by Kat Armas, and she says one of the greatest devastations of colonization is that it resulted in disembodiment. The idea of home has always been important to me, whether it's a physical home or a spiritual one, whether it's inside my body or the walls of where I'm living, or the land where I find myself. Finding home is a revolutionary act for many of us. So I want to read you a little bit more from my book. We cannot talk about protecting the land and our relationship to the earth without talking about colonization and the legacy of white supremacy in America. In Native, I write about the doctrine of discovery, but for those that need a recap, Pueblo descendant Sarah Augustine spells it out in her book, The Land is Not Empty. She says the doctrine of discovery is a theological, philosophical, and legal framework dating to the 15th century that gave Christian governments legal and moral right to invade and seize indigenous lands and dominate indigenous peoples. You cannot understand our relationship to the land here around the world without understanding the ways colonization has dominated and attempted to destroy indigenous people's connection to the land. But for this to truly matter, it has to be talked about and learned, and the history we've been given must be unlearned. It's discouraging to feel like we have to start at the beginning, a beginning we've never even reckoned with as a nation, but that's what we've got to do. The land deserves our hard work and a deep willingness to reorient ourselves toward the truth. And let's remember that the struggle to protect the land isn't happening only in the United States. Across the world, the land has resisted and been subject to pain and hurt. In India, indigenous farmers have been trying to protect their seeds and the land from companies like Monsanto for generations through various laws and collective action. But Donna Shiva, Indian scholar and environmental activist, writes about the fight to protect biodiversity. She says, indigenous knowledge systems existing in medicine, agriculture, and amongst fishers are the primary base for meeting the food and health needs of our people. Where commercial interests are concerned, biodiversity has no value. It is merely raw material for the production of commodities. And so in that, we're remembering that the ties our bodies have to the land still matters. It has always mattered, and it matters across the world. And so when we lose sight of each other, when we lose sight of our connection to the land, we're losing all of those relationships. And we're constantly trying to build it back again, all of us. So I share with people 5 ways to connect to Mother Earth. You can take any of these, leave them. They're just a few different ideas. So the first one is something I do in a lot of workshops, which is I tell people to write a letter to Mother Earth, or I have them start a journal of letters to Mother Earth. For many of us, this is just a way to begin a process of communication. Again, maybe it's something that we haven't done. Maybe it's something that can just be a really beautiful spiritual practice to write letters to the earth. I think I've done it a few times. I have a journal, and when I meet people in the workshop, it's always really powerful because we don't often think about this relationship to the land. Second one is research your food. Research the farmers that work to produce our food, research where our food is coming from, research our local foods, research indigenous foods, what are the foods that we're eating and where is it coming from? Number three, I often tell people to talk to their houseplants. This is something that can be silly, but can also be really beautiful because it's just to show that there is a relationship to the plants around us. So people have to start with something as simple as that, and I heard. So beyond that, there's obviously other ways to connect with the earth, but acknowledging our relationship with our houseplants with something as simple as that could be a really beautiful relationship. Number four, research colonization. Read books by Indigenous authors because there's so many incredible academic and non-academic Indigenous authors writing beautiful books, and it's incredible that they have given this wisdom to us that we get to glean from. And then number five, schedule time in your week for mindfulness walks, or bird watching, or even watching a nature documentary, like finding space in our hearts and in our week to spend time with the earth in some way can be really powerful and grounding. And the point that I make when I share these things with people is just to think about the fact that this is about a relationship, that we have a relationship to the earth that involves our bodies and our minds and our child selves and everything around us. So if we cannot accept that we have this tangible relationship, we're going to have a difficult time connecting back to our hearts and connecting to one another. So I want to end with a little essay from the end of my book. I end the book with this idea of lifelong resistance because I want people to remember that this is going to take our whole lives. We have the 7 generations. Thinking about our lifetime now connects to the 7 generations that came before us, and the 7 generations will come after us. That the work we do today doesn't end with us. It doesn't end in our lifetime. And so that's kind of part of what this last chapter of the book is about. But I want to read a section on, it's an essay I wrote because I was having a really hard time writing this book. I wrote it during COVID throughout the last few years, and it was one of those days where I just had a really hard time writing. And so I want to read that because I want to encourage you that even on the really hard days, the work that you're doing in the world and the ways that you're connecting to yourself and to each other and to the earth still matters. Even when it feels like it doesn't, even when it feels so heavy, even when the world feels so heavy, we're still doing the work. We're still trying to find ways to belong to one another. And that still matters. It still matters on every level. So this is from chapter 20. It is January 14th, 2022. I am in my bedroom, door shut, afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows, dogs barking in the background. The kids are at home doing school virtually. Winter jazz music is playing from a YouTube channel on my laptop, and I should be working on a book about everyday resistance, but I can't. I can't write because the cobwebs that have covered every corner of my mind are difficult to clear out. We've been in a global pandemic for over 2 years out of this writing, and it has taken its toll on us still. The hardest part is that I can do nothing about it. I can't do anything about the dogs barking, or the kids in virtual school, or the cobwebs. I am tired. And though I don't feel I've run out of words, I struggle with how to organize them once they come out of my head and onto the page. It's like I'm trapped in a stream of consciousness that I deeply need to sort through and nothing more. I need space to sift the words and ideas, to ask what the images mean and don't mean. And yet I sit here on the verge of tears, feeling like I have no idea what resistance even is right now. To resist the status quo right now in the midst of this, how, where, why? So I take a step back a moment and reconsider everything I've learned about difficult seasons and about grief. We don't always know when grief will come. We cannot always control the seasons. We must always trust our bodies to tell us the truth. We remember that grieving takes time. We take a few deep breaths no matter what. We try again when we're ready. So pause, breathe. Let's begin again. Resistance is surprisingly flexible. Sometimes when I feel like I can't, I need to rest. And sometimes when I feel like I can't, I need to write and lean in. And both can be true at the same time. Resistance, much like happiness or joy, isn't about having certain prerequisites. Living resistance doesn't always mean that I have both feet on the ground, but it means that I am grounded nonetheless. Resistance is about being honest about who I am and who I am not, about how I am doing and what I am capable of at any moment. Many of us have been reeling and in traumatized fight, flight, or freeze mode for the past few years, as the world has looked different than it did before. We will spend our entire lives asking what resistance means for us. But in this moment where we are, we must ask, what does resistance mean for me right now? It means taking my dog for a walk. It means checking in with my kids. It means eating a healthy snack or meal. It means supporting my friend Shell's Patreon as she creates incredible music. It means crying when I need to cry. It means encouraging other writers to keep going. It means recognizing my limitations today, tomorrow, and in the coming days. It means saying, I am a human being. I am always arriving. It turns out resistance is simply choosing to arrive.
Thank you so much, Kaitlin. If you want to stay up here just a few, Betty has something that I'd like to present you with. So thank you for your time, your love, grace, everything that you bring with you. Debbie is going to present you with a show.
Some of the ladies who are here can help do this as well. So this is the Strong Woman song. Way, hey, way, hey, oh. Way, hey, way, hey, oh. Way, hey, way, yo. Way, hey, way, way, hey, yo. Way, hey, way, hey, yo. Way, hey, way, hey, yo. Way, hey, way, yo. Way, hey, way, hey, way, yo.
Before we all start to scatter, or anybody wants to purchase a copy of Kaitlin's book, just a couple of events that Indigenous Wellbeing has coming up. We have the third annual Southern Arizona Missing Murdered Indigenous Peoples Awareness 5K Run Walk. It's mouthful. It's coming up May 7th, Sunday, and you can register online. There'll be lots of freebies, shirts, some prizes from Urban Native Era, for those of you that know that organization. And we also have our MMIP symposium coming up Friday, May 5th for the National Day of Awareness. And this symposium will be done virtually on Zoom. You can also sign up on the Indigenous Wellbeing page as well. And it'll focus on leaders from all across the globe, actually. We'll have some leaders from the Sami people in Norway will be speaking. We have some from First Nations Canada, Indigenous peoples in Mexico, as well as the UN, and some speakers from the US Department of Justice as well. So it's going to be a really great panel of speakers. So hopefully you all can sign up for those. And thank you everyone so much for coming, for enjoying some food with us all. And yeah, so if you want to go talk to Kaitlin, she'll be up here. You can purchase her book. And there's also a concert going on tonight. And Debbie, can you give a little bit more about that?
Everybody is welcome to join us with Randy Kemp, a native flutist and storyteller, as we kind of complete Kaitlin's trip here today. The concert is at St. Andrew's Episcopal Church on 5th and 16th. It's at 7 o'clock this evening. Randy's family is also coming, and they are artists, and they will be setting up in the parish hall. So come, it should be a really wonderful night.
Thank you all, Pasquale. Thank you.